So today we have a coffee talk with Craig, and Craig is the senior director of QA at Lucid Software. We will be using a Spark board. I have that Spark board linked in our manual testers Slack chat. So feel free to click on that link. That's called this Lucid Spark board. And it'll lead you to this thing over here, which is where we're going to post our questions. And so, yeah, feel free to click on that, and then we will turn the time over to Craig.
Greetings all, welcome. So if you've never done like a coffee talk type of thing before, the idea is we throw some questions that we're dealing with at our current, on our current teams, put on a sticky note, and then everybody votes. And then we answer those questions in, topic preference order from everybody. So let's throw some sticky notes on there. If you don't want to jump on the board, you can just put them in the chat and then we'll stick them on the board.
This is Coretta. I was trying to figure out a way to put in my question, but I'm trying to figure out how do you manage a growing manual test plan? So say once it gets over 100 test case scenarios.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on how complicated your individual tests are. You're going to want to use the right tool for the job, but you can go as something as basic as a spreadsheet for really simple stuff, all the way to we've used Trello, we've used Jira. Don't recommend that one though. That's a little overkill.
Yeah, that's what I'm used. Well, I have to use the tools that I
yeah. I mean, Jira is just hard because it's usually slow, and so you get too many test cases, and then you're depending on how many, other, user stories and whatnot you have in Jira, it can get pretty darn slow. We've also used something like TestRail. TestRail is really fantastic for it, but it's a dedicated third-party product, and if it does require a subscription that is not negligible.
Okay, and then what about Azure DevOps?
I've used Azure DevOps. I'm not familiar with that one. Okay. I'm a pretty documentation-light person, so I would also ask, like, if you're not in an industry where you are required to document for the sake of compliance, are you sure that documenting is the right thing to be doing? Is it worth doing? Because I would say, for us at least, no, we don't do an extensive amount, nor have we really ever done an extensive amount of documentation. We don't write test plans, we don't write test cases. We only write what I would say is a testing prompt. And a testing prompt is little more than a bullet point reminder, maybe even just a single bullet point of some of the things you need to do in order to consider something, like all the things you need to do to consider the product tested for, say, a sanity check or whatnot. You're not giving detailed, do this, then get that result, do this, then get that result. Because the issue with that is you want the testers to use their own creativity, their own imagination, their own ideas, their own processes. And if you give them all the steps to perform, then you lose all of their creativity and individuality. And you don't actually get as good a coverage on the tests. So test prompts might not be so bad, and then it's easier to track that in something simple like a spreadsheet program or Trello, which you can usually use for relatively cheap. And then you don't have to go into using something crazy like Jira. I guess if you have Jira, you can also use Confluence, and you could just keep them in Confluence as well.
Okay, I should have put in a question like to say, what if you're working with others that are not really I'm trying to see how to work, like people that don't necessarily have a testing mindset, but testing is part of their job.
Why is testing part of their job if they don't have a testing mindset?
Yeah, you know how like there are roles where you have to perform analysis and you have to do some form of testing, but it might not necessarily be like sometimes a person might be in a role where it just makes them have to do some form of testing, but they might not, and then they might be new at it and they might not really be creative and thinking of things outside the box to test.
My answer is probably going to be terribly unhelpful, but I would say maybe you need to change your hiring process to make sure that you're getting people that have the right mindset to be thinking in the right way. And also, should you be asking those people to do that testing? Is that the right thing for them to be doing? Is it the best use of their time? Are they people that are highly skilled in a particular area and then you're asking them to do something they're not actually good at? Is that worth, like, the company is paying these people to do this one thing. Why are we asking them to do something else that they're actually not good at? Right? Why would we not bring in more people that are great at that thing and have them do the thing that we need and let this other group do the thing that they're good at and not commingle those two things? I know sometimes people think, oh, like, oh yeah, it's a cost savings, we'll just split the work, but it rarely works out that way.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, maybe have you been in situations where you were just put with a team or people where they had to perform testing, but they might not, they really don't like testing, but they're just doing it because they were put into the role or on a team or on a project?
Sure. And like that can work okay for a time. Like I view that more as a stopgap measure. But you need to be able to have the testers that are good at it do a little bit of coaching or pair testing with the people that are bad at it, so they can see examples of what good testing is, what the mindset is, and that can at least help them improve a bit. But if you're asking people to do it and they don't want to do it, and it's not actually why they took the job in the first place, but you're making them do it regular, don't be surprised if you start to have attrition.
Okay, yeah. I was asking that question because it's like I'm being in situations where that's just ends up being part of a project that a person was put on, and then they had to perform testing, and then you just hear them say, well, I'm doing it for the job, but I really don't like testing.
Right, but that's where, like, as a tester, you should be questioning that. You should be pushing back and saying, this is not the right way to do this. This is a poor quality approach to testing. And if we want to do testing, then we need to get people who actually know how to test. Asking people that don't want to do it to do the testing fundamentally means you aren't testing. You may as well not do anything at all at that point. But by asking somebody that hates testing to do testing is a waste of everybody's time, and certainly isn't going to protect the user from bugs.
Yeah, that's what I've found. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, let's see. What do we got on the board here? What is your background lights? Oh, that's actually suction cup to the table for once. Oh, whatever. Oh God, I blind myself. Just one of these things. It was like probably 15, 20 bucks on Amazon. I don't know, it was cheap. But it keeps things interesting. And when the pandemic started, you're sitting in these Zoom meetings with people and you're seeing the same backgrounds day in and day out. And the human brain gets pretty bored quickly and starts to just ignore things and edit things. So I thought, well, maybe if I put these crazy lights in my room, that'll help people's brains pay attention more, or at least not be as bored talking to me. So I don't know how much it's helped, but it's fun at least.
I agree. It is fun. It's the first thing I noticed.
Yeah.
Have you been able to tell if anyone's paying attention more to you with them? Or
I don't know. I don't
I'm a
have
little
any like,
jealous. My room's
yeah,
not set up. I can't do that setup. I'm kind of upset.
yeah, I don't have that kind of empirical data. But I feel like people at least take notice of it from the very get-go, and people often will comment on it. And so that at least means that initial meeting, that initial part of the meeting is memorable. And maybe that helps the rest of it be more memorable.
All right, Craig, we have this question. Why does Lucid rely so heavily on manual testing versus automation?
Yeah.
Or-
So first of all, it's not manual versus automation. They are two sides of the same coin, and they serve two separate purposes, and you should be doing both. It's not one or the other. It should be both as part of testing. And the reason why Lucid and I, because Lucid does it because I said to do it. The reason why we do it this way is because, I mean, look at this product. This is all Canvas. This is a very difficult thing to automate using something like Selenium. There's the instant you came in here and started moving random stuff around, there's no way to emulate that. Like, you can't think of every possible use case and write a test case for every possible user interaction with these products. It's not a thing. And this was true in the 3D modeling and animation software I did as well. Like, yeah, we had automation to verify that the renders were consistent, and that when we did a release that, say, added, God ray rendering, that didn't somehow break any of the other light rendering, and those images came out looking the same. We rely heavily on manual testing because what we do, this product we build, is a heavily user interface based product. So we need to have a lot of people getting in, using it, interacting with it, because that is the only way to say for certain that users should be able to get into the product, use it, it'll be intuitive, and they'll be able to solve the problems they set out to solve. We can't automate that kind of testing, and we can't automate learning whether or not the product is intuitive. We also rely on the manual testers because they are able to test before code is written. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't think you can have automation that tests things before code's written. So what you're doing is you're having those testers listening to what is the planning, what is the story we're building, what is the epic we're building. That tester already has knowledge and experience of how the product currently works and the features that already exist in it. And then they can start thinking about what might this thing that we're talking about building look like in the product. And then when a UX person starts building out mocks for that, then the tester can look at those mocks, and using their experience and time interacting with the product, they can envision, what will that be like if I'm actually clicking on these things? And the tester can say, oh, hey, I don't actually know that this is going to be super intuitive, just from looking at the mocks based on their extensive experience using the product. On the flip side, the automation stuff is all about making sure that the developers have a very consistent and reliable experience with running their builds, and making sure that their builds didn't break. And if they did break unexpectedly, being able to quickly identify where and hopefully how that happened, so that something can be done very fast to fix that. And those are two separate things, right? The automation thing, it allows us to have more time for the manual testers to just focus on the exploratory testing of the user interaction pieces of the product. But it also ensures that we have the ability to release twice a day, every day. We're fully CI/CD for the entire product, and have been for, bits of it for years, but it is 100% since February. So, and then also the other thing is that we have more automation we have more manual testers than automation testers because our engineers write the automation tests themselves. We don't have developers build a product or a feature and then they pass the automation test writing to an automation engineer. That doesn't make any sense. It's terribly inefficient because then the automation engineer has to go in and learn, okay, what did the developer build? How did they build it? What, it just doesn't make as much sense because of the amount of time it takes for that automation engineer to relearn what all that has been done by the developer already. It's just way more efficient for the developer to write their own tests. So our automation engineer's job is to build frameworks that empower the developers to easily and effectively write those tests themselves. That's another reason why we have way more manual people than we have automation engineers. It doesn't take nearly as many automation engineers to build and then maintain those frameworks for the developers. Any other questions about that? I know that's probably not what a lot of other people do, but I just kind of move these so that they're stacked in the done pile. Let's see. How can QA testers have more ownership impact on their Scrum teams? I mean, one, it helps tremendously to be embedded in the Scrum team and to be working with them day to day, going to their stand-ups, going to their planning, going to their estimation meetings. It helps to have full ownership over bugs for that Scrum team so that the tester is the one deciding during planning what bugs are we going to take. And then the tester says, these are the bugs we should take based on the work we're doing and based on the severity of these bugs that we have. Being more involved with the UX people and taking a look at those mocks and looking at the product, everything that's built for it throughout the entire life cycle of it, rather than just waiting for a developer to say, okay, it's done, you can look at it now. And that's, I know a lot of places that's not entirely up to the testers, but it's the sort of thing that it's healthy to push for. It's healthy to say, hey, like, can we try this different thing? Maybe a couple of Scrum teams we try this out with and see how it works on them. And if we get good results, we can expand it to other Scrum teams. See if you can get developers to buy in on the idea of that additional involvement from QA and push for it in a smaller test group. So, and then see if that works well for the organization. Because if they don't have a say, it's hard to have a feeling of ownership. And it's hard to, I think, have a sense of ownership and impact if you don't have the autonomy to try things. If you're just executing test scripts, and it's just a checklist and you're just doing what the checklist tells you to do, I feel like it's really hard to have a sense of ownership about that. Because you're just doing what somebody else told you to do. I mean, okay, maybe you wrote the test script too, but it's not the same as if somebody's handing you a pull request and saying, I am trusting you, tester, to figure out what needs to be done so that all the rest of us on the team can have the confidence that when we release this to production, it will go well and it will work. And by giving them that kind of trust and that kind of autonomy, I think that's where you start to see a lot of the ownership and impact. Any questions or comments or thoughts about that?
I was going to say that only works maybe if a person has a testing mindset, because I know sometimes I work with individuals that they probably want you to tell them exactly what to do. And if you don't, like if you say test the search feature, and then you give them one thing, they might just test that one thing, and then they might not think of other things to do, or like you have to hold their hand almost.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. But again, don't hire those people to do testing. Like that's not what they're good at, and that's not what you need from somebody who's going to do testing.
Right. I mean, sometimes you're just put to work with those people and you don't have a
Mhm.
choice. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and maybe you can find a set of test cases that they can work on and be efficient with, but you can't really expect them to have a sense of ownership about it. This is why I don't like to work with third-party testing companies, because they're just working off these test cases. They don't have a lot of they have no ownership over the product. They have no sense of autonomy whatsoever. They're just doing what they're told. You can find the people on the team that do have a bit more of that sense of ownership and autonomy, and they have the right mindset. And what you want to do is highlight their successes, give them the opportunity to dig into the product and do that more exploratory, creative testing, and then demonstrate to the higher ups that these types of people are having way more success and giving us way better quality than this other mindset. And that means that forcing people to do testing that don't want to do testing is ultimately way less efficient, and there are better things they could be doing with their time. It's going to be a process and a cultural change, a big paradigm shift for a lot of people to think that way. And you have to start small, and you have to just be prepared for it's going to take you probably years to get that fully implemented on the team. Number one trait of a good tester, it's kind of a toss-up for me between creativity and curiosity.
Yay. I was thinking curiosity too.
Yeah, it's man, it's hard to pick between the two, because like both of those things are so critically important. You need to be meticulous, you need to be methodical, you need to be tenacious, and sometimes you just need to be flat out patient. But curiosity and creativity are kind of can they share the number one? Just they're so important, especially to really strong exploratory testing in an open UI like this. You've got to have people that are just going to be super creative. So maybe it just kind of depends on the nature of the product, right? Something with use cases like Lucid Spark that we're in right now, creativity might be slightly more important. Whereas in another product, curiosity might be your number one. So in classic QA fashion, the answer to that is it depends. All right, let's see these bigger. How long does it take to run all of your manual tests? Do you run all tests before each deployment? How often do you deploy? All right. Do you run all tests before each deployment? Well, we used to. That was called a regression. We don't have the regression anymore. We don't do it anymore. So no. How long does it take us to run all the manual tests? Again, that's related to the regression. We don't do it anymore. So it takes us no time, and we release twice a day, every day of the week. So there's a difference between the regression and the exploratory testing that people are doing for the pull requests that are coming through. The exploratory testing is probably 80% of everybody's job, if not more, and that's what they spend all day, every day doing. But they're doing all of that testing roughly at about the same time that the developers are code reviewing the change as well. So QA happens at the same time as code review, and all the tests get done. And then when they're done testing, it merges and goes to master. And then within hours, it gets deployed to production. So, and we don't have like a massive documented collection of what's every manual test we could possibly do. Again, if we do keep track of that stuff, it's usually as testing prompts. So it's the reminders. And to explain what I mean by that, a testing prompt for this UI you're looking at would be like, title bar, sharing bar, toolbar, contextual pop-up bar, et cetera, et cetera. just to remind you, there's all these different control places that you want to look at. And then if there was a particular bug that kept happening in a particular area, like, maybe the sharing icons were really sketchy one time, we might include an extra prompt that says, to make sure that the sharing, icons are showing up correctly, because in the past it's broken. Like just a very short thing to get people to realize, oh, this is a thing, it's important, I need to look at it. Now, to answer the question about when we did have a regression, so when I started at Lucid and I was the first tester and there was nobody else doing it, the manual regression took me an entire week, every other week, and I did that for 2 years straight by myself. And it was all day, Monday through Friday, of me running through and using the product in the same set roughly of steps, and just try to approach things a little differently every time I looked at it. But I did the same regression over and over. But then we were able to get that down to a week. And then we were able to get it down to 3 days. And then at the beginning of the year in January, it was taking just about a day for the whole team to get through everything. And now it's dead. Good riddance, regression. Let's see.
I was going to ask, when you
Yes.
used to have to do regression testing, did you have manual test scripts written out to give you steps at all?
No, again, it's just the testing prompts.
Okay.
So, when you look at something like this color picker, we would just say color pickers on the toolbar, right? And that'd be
Okay.
about it.
Okay.
There wouldn't be any considerable, because again, if I give them all of the steps to perform, creativity shuts down, their curiosity shuts down, and they just do what the checklist says to do. Checklists kill creativity and curiosity. So that's why we use the testing prompt concept instead of actual test plans and test cases. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, what will software testing look like in 10 years? Probably not much different than it looks like today, because it doesn't look much different today than it looked like 10 years prior. So I don't imagine that it'll change all that much. Maybe we'll have some new thing that everybody's being all hyperbolic about for testing. 10 years ago, Selenium was going to kill all the manual testing jobs. Today, it's AI and ML is going to kill all the manual testing jobs. Neither of those things is in any way, shape, or form true. AI is more likely to interfere with programmers' jobs than it is QA, because it just can't do what it says it can do, except in rare instances and very specific cases. But for a product like ours, AI can't do almost any testing. And we know that from trying. Do QA participate in code reviews? No, they don't. Because our testers are not programmers. And I kind of prefer to use the right tool for the job. So it's unlikely that a QA person is going to understand enough about the complexities and the intricacies of writing difficult code in order to make sure that we've architected a feature right. That's much better suited to the developer. They do their testing at the same time that the code review is happening, which is just to say, developer submits their pull request, that triggers a code review with another developer, but it also says to the QA person, hey, do what you need to do to test this now. Not that I think there's anything wrong if a QA person's curious. I wouldn't discourage them from trying to look at it. I just don't, most of our people aren't going to be able to do that sort of thing. All right, let's see this one. So I will expand. There we go. How do you have confidence if you don't run your tests before deployments? Because we already tested it. So we we are doing all of our testing before it's deploying. But this is right. There's two separate types of testing. We're doing the exploratory testing of the functionality, right, while it's still being built. And then the developers who build the functionality write the automation associated with that functionality. And then when we go to code review stage, QA is testing that to verify that, yes, this is intuitive. Yes, this does what we said it should do. Yes, it fails gracefully when it doesn't work. We go through all that kind of testing. The code review passes, we commit, it merges, it goes to production, right? Then you've got, whenever a build is run, the automation tests that were associated with building that, those will automatically run as part of that build process to let everybody know, yes, that new piece that we built is still functioning as we expect it to, in as well as the automation can tell. And so we do run those kinds of tests before every single build and every single deployment. And we have confidence because we know that the developers have code reviewed it, and the QA people have done their work to exploratory test it. Any other questions about that? Because I think it's the concept of the shift left testing. Like, we've shifted about as far left as we can go. Does Lucid use usability testing, observing users, using the product in the real world as a supplement to in-house testing? We product PMs, they'll get on calls, they'll talk to users, they'll watch them, they'll record them using the product. So yes, we do have that. That's not something that QA manages or handles, but if we want to take learnings from that, we certainly can, to get a better understanding for, is the kind of testing that we're doing accurate to what our users are doing? So we do want to coordinate those things and make sure that we're paying attention. Because it's a fair point. Like, if you're not validating that what you're doing for manual testing is in fact what your users are doing for using the product, then you have a problem and you're not testing the right way. Does the test team interact with marketing? Under what circumstances? We interact with marketing in the sense that marketing is building websites to advertise the various products and features, and we help them test to make sure that those website pages are working correctly, their links are working correctly. We do some quick verification with them on that. But that's predominantly the way in which we work with them. Mailings. I guess testing mailings is probably another big one. When marketing wants to do a huge mailings push, we will help them test that to make sure that that mailings push goes well, because never underestimate the ability of mailings to fail miserably and send emails to millions of people you didn't mean to. Assume that it will, unless you verified that it won't. All right, what kind of tests do your devs write? They should write unit and component tests. What about UI visual? So yes, they're writing unit tests. They are writing component tests. They will write like end-to-end UI tests only if we don't feel like any of the lower level tests will be sufficient to cover things. Same thing with the visual tests. We only do screenshot based tests if there's basically no other way to reliably perform that test at a lower level. And as much as possible, we are always trying to push those automated tests as far down as we possibly can, so that we're not stuck relying on a bunch of Selenium style like end-to-end tests, because those are inherently fragile and flaky. Accessibility is something that we're doing more of now, and I18N, same thing. We've been doing that for a while, but all of that should be at the unit or component level. All right, this looks like Have you had a decrease in production bugs since changing your testing strategy? We didn't change our testing strategy. This has always been our testing strategy. I suppose we've slowly implemented this over, a decade. And it's fair to say that back in February, when we finally turned off the regression, that's a bit of a change. And so far, it looks like the trend line is still decreasing. The trend line for bugs that have escaped to production that we believe QA could have realistically caught during testing. It's a terrible metric name, but it's our one true metric for how well is the product behaving in users' hands. So I think, yes, we have seen that decrease. But, it's not just because we turned off the regression. It's not well, we're doing less testing, so to speak, so we're finding less bugs. It's more to do with, because we are testing so much earlier in the process, so aggressively, we're actually writing less bugs, and less bugs are getting committed to production. Let's see. Do you recommend testing prompts over detailed checklists and high-risk products like bank and medical? Nope. No, I sure don't. In those kind of high-risk places where you have, you almost certainly have some kind of legal compliance that you have to worry about. Yes, absolutely. You need to be writing testing prompts. You need to be writing full test plans, test cases. It needs to be very detailed. My previous job with 3D modeling software, my manager had been a tech writer for NASA. And so detailed test cases were super important there, obviously, as well they should be. For our 3D modeling software, it really wasn't. And so there are certainly instances where, yes, absolutely, the way we do things at Lucid, 100% don't do that. That's not a good idea. You need to be mindful of what is your audience and what is the safety of them if things go wrong, and test accordingly and document accordingly. We just are not in an industry where we have those kind of compliance and we have those kind of restraints. So we have a bit of a luxury of not needing to write the checklists. Let's see. What do you recommend for improving exploratory testing skills apart from testing the product as per spec? How else can you do deep testing or decide we have enough test coverage? Pretty much any creative endeavor helps you practice the skills of thinking outside the box, helps you practice the curiosity. Odd as it may sound, I personally, for me, I think that playing role-playing games is a great way to exercise that mental muscle of being creative, thinking on the fly, improvising, right? Because a lot of those skills kind of bleed into what you do as a tester. Being able to identify different types of communication styles and address those and interact with people in a way that works best for them. You have to do that at the gaming table when you're playing an RPG with people, and you have to do that with developers, because developers are all different types of people. Some of them love to joke and kid, and some of them appreciate it when you give them a hard time when they mess something up, but some of them need you to just be very straightforward, and some of them wish you would never talk to them again. But you've got to find a way to communicate effectively with people. And I found role-playing games to be a very easy and fun way to practice a lot of those skills. How else can we do deep testing or decide we have enough test coverage? I think in that sense, you've got to get a second opinion. If you've done everything you can think of, it doesn't hurt to ping somebody else on the team. We're very collaborative testers at Lucid. We work with each other on a regular basis to improve our coverage, improve our testing ideas. So it's always good to say, like, hey, let's try a swarm test, let's try a pair test, or even just say, hey, if you were going to look at this PR, what's the first thing that comes to your mind, just as a sanity check to see if you've thought of that? The reason we try to hire such a diverse group of backgrounds and experiences and education is to get as many different mindsets as possible so that people will approach testing things as differently as possible, and therefore they can help each other more effectively at thinking of different ways to get proper test coverage. We can't put all the weight of quality on our shoulders. We need to share that and distribute that with not just the other QA team members, but with the developers, the UX people, and the PMs as well. And everybody needs to own that quality and be thinking about it. And so it's important for the tester to remember it. This isn't all on me. There are other people I can talk to, and I should solicit additional information as needed. Don't get siloed. It's bad for you. Let's see. How long does it take to run all of your automated tests? I'm not gonna lie, I honestly never remember the answer to this. I would be guessing wildly. It's somewhere around an hour and a half, I think, to run absolutely everything. Let's see. Do you expect QA candidates to have certain types of degrees? Nope. I don't expect them to have any degree, frankly, because there is no, QA degree. There are certain degrees where if I see it, I think, oh, we've had success with that type of degree in the past. So that can be really great. Any of the sciences, because they're thinking about the scientific method, and that can be a very methodical approach to something. But people who have had art degrees can also be very creative and very think outside of the box really well, so they can be fantastic. So no, I don't really have a particular type of degree I need to see, or any degree at all. What I need to see is the mindset. I need to see them demonstrate creativity, curiosity, tenacity, methodical, those kind of traits, so that I can say, yes, I can teach them to actually test the product. I can't teach them to have those traits and to apply those traits to the product in their day-to-day. When should external qualities be considered? Never. I mean, that's my preference. I guess external vendors would be considered when you need a stopgap measure for a short period of time while you're attempting to transition, say, and we did this, a bunch of tests from the regression to automation, but there will be this period of time where it takes a while to write the automated tests that would cover those manual regression tests. And so it doesn't hurt to, we sent that out to an external vendor to cover those tests, because they were already pretty well defined for the most part. I mean, as I recall, I think we had to write quite a lot more detail than we had anyway, but because we just write test prompts. But it was still beneficial to be able to give those tests to that group for a period of time that freed up the time for the testers internally to focus more on the exploratory testing and the shift left testing, and working with the teams throughout the life cycle of something being developed. And then once we got the automation written for that huge chunk of manual regression tests, we were able to end that contract and not need them anymore. But in general, like if you want great quality from your product, then you need to have people inside who care about the product themselves and have a reason to have a vested interest in seeing it succeed. And that's pretty much never going to come from external vendors. A lot of times they're paid to just click through a bunch of buttons. They get paid by how many steps they complete, and there's no real measure of what does it mean for them to have done quality work. Any other questions I can help answer or think about, or anyone have their own perspective where you're like, Craig, you're crazy, what are you doing? I mean, you're all certainly very welcome. Happy to answer your questions anytime. Probably easiest to ping me on LinkedIn, I guess, or one of the QA Slack channels that I'm in.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for coming.
everyone.